In this episode of Ideas, I talked to Chris Guillebeau about listening to his audience, his new book, Born for This: Passion, Fear, and Community. Here's our conversation. All right, I'm really excited about today's guest, Chris Guillebeau, because his story intrigues me. And if you don't already know him, I want you to hear his story and his perspective for yourself. He's a New York Times bestselling author of 4 books, including his newest, Born for This, founder of the World Domination Summit. He's a travel hacker and has traveled to every country in the world. What does he not do? Chris, thank you for coming on the show.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much, Adam. It's a huge honor.
Would you like to add any additional points that I didn't mention that may allow those listening to connect with you in an even deeper way?
Yes, well, that was a great introduction. I appreciate that. I would just say probably the only relevant point that's really important to me is that yes, I've done all these things. I have been able to go to every country in the world, write books, etc. But for me, what's most exciting over the past 8 years, I've been writing for a community of really great, awesome people from all over the world, and that's kind of fueled a lot of things, including the books, including World Domination Summit, including a lot of stuff. So about 8 years ago, I decided to start sharing this journey publicly, and I'm so glad that I did.
Awesome. I follow the blog as well. What a great blog it is. Read today's post actually on fear. That's a great post.
Thanks.
Yeah. Next, I want to talk about your fantastic book, Born for This. Give us a few details in your heart behind the book.
So I mentioned the community and how a lot of stuff, kind of comes from them organically, grassroots, and this book is no exception. A lot of people in our little group feel like they've won the career lottery. They feel like they have their dream job, or they've created something that really works for them. It's not just that they go to a job as a means to an end. Their work actually kind of makes them come alive. And I think that's the goal for a lot of us, but a lot of us are kind of on the outside looking in. We feel like maybe there's something wrong with us if we don't know our life purpose, if we don't know what our niche is or that thing we're supposed to do. So I wanted to kind of decode the process and talk to these people from different backgrounds and really understand, okay, how did they come to that position? How did they create that dream job or find that dream job, whether it's working for themselves, whether it's working in a company or an organization? Were they just lucky, or did they make choices along the way? And it's probably some of both, but wherever they were able to make choices, how did they make those choices so that we could apply that in our own life as well? That's the goal.
That's awesome. For me, the main point that really stood out was when you were talking about joy and that your work should spark joy in the lives of others.
Mm.
And then later on in the book, you say that our first step should be to eliminate ideas that don't bring us joy when we think of them. The other point that really did something for me was the question you gave readers to avoid getting off track and to always ask ourselves, why should people care about this when we work? And that is an awesome filter. Do you care to talk any about those points there?
Yeah, of course. Well, I looked at this concept of joy, which is not quite the same as passion. There's this model of following your passion or following your bliss. And I think passion is important in life. But like you said in the second part, like, why should people care about what you do? Not everyone's going to care about, everything that you're excited about or you're passionate about. And some things should just be your own thing or your hobby or something you do for fun. That's great. But joy, maybe it's a little bit deeper. I mean, joy is something that you can find purpose in, something that you not just enjoy doing it, but you take meaning from it. And you're like, this thing is kind of special for me. And because we can't just do anything that we want and expect to monetize it, for me, I'm really interested in helping people find this overlap between, okay, where is their joy and what do other people find valuable, helpful, interesting? I started this process a few years ago with the $100 startup, and people have really responded very well to that concept because it's very applicable. It's not meant to be like, let's talk about what you'd like to do. It's like, let's really look at what you're good at and how that can be valuable in the marketplace, because that to me is success. Success is not just wealth or making money. It's making something that people care about and engage with. So, you started off by saying like, this has helped you to have a filter or, ask yourself different questions. That to me is very motivating. I want people to read the book and say, like, okay, cool, I read this and it gave me that filter. Or it helped me with something I've been struggling with. That to me is what it's all about.
You're in it for the long-term impact, not the short-term.
Yeah, I mean, short-term game is fine. Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, I think long-term impact is the goal for sure.
So now you touched on passion. You were talking about joy, some of the ideas that drove the book, especially joy. But where does your passion and joy for life come from?
I like discovery. I like exploration. That's kind of how travel was such a big part of my life for a long time and continues to be. I like stimulation and being in a new environment and maybe challenging myself. I believe very much in striving. I had the previous book I wrote was called The Happiness of Pursuit, and that was very much about pursuing a quest and going all in with something and choosing to sacrifice something to receive something else in return. So I like having a big goal and working toward it. I like impact. I like being able to find a connection between something I do and something that other people are working toward. If I can do those things pretty much every day, if I can create every day, if I can write, and I can also kind of explore and travel and have my own life however I want, that makes me very happy.
That's great. Kind of switching gears here, I believe that discussing our fears rather than holding them in is so important.
Mhm.
Chris, what would you say your biggest fear or fears are in life?
Yeah, I have a lot of fears actually. Say probably the biggest one would be as I get a little bit older and looking back and say, I have been able to do all this stuff, but are my best days behind me? That's kind of a fear, and that's why I want to continue to try to do bigger things, and not just bigger, but hopefully better and deeper and more impactful. Probably the biggest fear, but maybe some other fears are like, am I making the wrong decision, or am I just kind of stuck in indecision? Am I stuck in analysis paralysis? Is there something that I long to do, but for some reason I'm not able to do it, and I'm going to regret that later? Those are probably the first few fears that come to mind.
Yeah. No, those are huge. And I think all of us probably experience some of those in at least some way. Now that we've talked about fear, my question to you now is bravery and success one and the same for you? What is success? We've kind of touched on that, but what does success and bravery look like to Chris?
Success and bravery, I don't think they can be the same because there's lots of things that you could be successful at that don't require bravery or courage. There's lots of things you could technically have a win in, and that's fine, but you're not necessarily doing something that challenges you or requires you to be brave. And similarly, you could be very brave in something, you could be very courageous and take a big risk. And if it's a risk, there's a possibility that it might fail. So you might not necessarily be successful in that risk, but you are being very brave and courageous in choosing to undertake it. So I think they're actually quite distinct. And for me, success is that striving. Success is continuously trying to improve. Success is not living in the past, but trying to build something for the future while also living in the moment. If I think what success is for me, that's what I think of.
Now, going back to the beginning, when you first started out, did you see it becoming what it is today with blog and books and the World Domination Summit? Did you have any thought that would happen, or was it more of a live life and opportunities opened up and you saw them and walked through those doors? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, it absolutely wasn't the first thing. I mean, I definitely didn't have like this big vision of, okay, I'm going to pursue this course and here's where I'm going to be 10 years later, 15 years later. And
Yeah.
I mean, what I saw in the book, like all this research I did, most people actually aren't like that. It's very, very few people who kind of know from a young age, like, here's this thing I'm going to do. And here's the course that's in front of me. Probably the vast majority of us, especially those of us who do feel very fortunate, who feel like, okay, I am doing something that I believe in and care about. We've had to go down lots of different paths and roads to get to that. And for me, I don't know if it was so much just like living in the moment. So I don't know if the second part is completely accurate either. I think I
Mhm.
was trying to work towards stuff,
Mm.
definitely like yearning. I had this desire to, I believed a lot in deferred gratification in terms of like, I'm willing to work for something for a long period of time without an initial payoff. I'm willing to believe in the process or the journey as much as I am the destination. But I didn't completely know, like, here's what the destination is. I was an aid worker for a few years, and that's what sparked the love of discovery and exploration. I lived in West Africa. I've been an entrepreneur for a number of years, so I really valued freedom and independence and autonomy. Really wanted to choose for myself, make my own decisions. And then as I had done these things for maybe 5 or 10 years, I wanted to take it to the next level. I wanted to find a way to build community because I knew there were lots of other people out there in the world who either saw the world in the same way or would relate to the way these ideas that I had and the experience that I had. And so I kept working towards something, but I didn't necessarily know exactly what it would entail.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think going back to exactly what you said at the beginning, a lot of people are like that. I can't say that I saw everything happening that it did, but it was put one foot in front of the other, experience life, and things will come up and it'll create as you go.
Hmm.
And that's the beautiful journey.
Awesome, man. Totally agree.
So I really wanted to get to this next question because it's what this whole show is built on, sparking some new ideas in all of us. For you, what is that one topic you believe that needs to be discussed that isn't being discussed right now?
I think for me, the topic is how can you serve your existing community as opposed to trying to grow your community? And this is true even if some of the listeners are not bloggers or podcasters or trying to build something. Like most of us are trying to build something, but whatever that is, I think even for years, like I've talked about this, about the need to serve your existing community, but maybe there's been some dissonance because I'm talking about it, but then I'm actually going out and spending most of my time on things to grow the audience. So I guess for me, where I think people are going to be more successful in the future, especially in this world of kind of a saturated marketplace, lots of people doing lots of stuff, everybody has a message, everybody has something, and that's great. I think the people who are going to stand out are the ones who are really, really focused on deeper connections, truly building relationships, not just building a relationship in terms of an email list or something, but actually really identifying problems that people have and providing real solutions. And I think there's so much value there. And I think it's something that so many people overlook. And at the same time, people are really struggling. People are really struggling to kind of stand out because there's so much saturation. And I think this is the way to do it. It's going to be different for different people, of course, like how that's expressed or what the strategy is. But for me, at least, I'm trying to think a lot more about that, about how I can create deeper connections with the people who already care about what I'm doing, as opposed to, going out to get X number of new people or whatever.
Right. And that's so important that you mention it will look different for everybody else. I think a lot of people will look at your journey and think that they have to travel,
Hmm.
or look at an entrepreneur's journey and think they have to start a business to be somebody. But
Hmm.
so many times people miss the point that all you have to do is look to your right or your left, and there are people already there who need you to reach out to them.
Absolutely.
All right, next, who are some of your heroes, the people who inspire you?
I don't know if I really look to celebrities that much or other authors. I have lots of great friends, definitely people doing really good work. Jonathan Fields is someone who's always been a mentor to me. He has a wonderful project called Good Life Project that profiles all kinds of interesting people. But for the most part, I mean, there's a few other people like that. But for the most part, I tend to look to just people in the community who are doing really awesome stuff, people who don't necessarily have a public platform. They're not trying to be a famous blogger or anything or online celebrity. They're just doing cool stuff. So I know a lot of people who are working in Africa still or in Haiti, people who are doing public service projects, people who are not directly charity related, but people who are just trying to make art or do something that they care about. And their commercial interest is maybe a lot lower than mine is or somebody else. And I really respect that. So I tend to look to people who are not completely known all the time.
Yeah, Jonathan Fields is great. I've followed him for a while. Not sure how long he's been doing what he does, but what's the best advice you've ever received?
I'm not very big on advice, either receiving it or giving it. I try not to, and that probably sounds arrogant, but I really do believe that most of us, we either intuitively know what we're supposed to do, or asking a dozen people isn't necessarily going to help us figure it out. And so I kind of learned more by experience and trial and error. And there's certainly been a lot of error involved, like lots of mistakes and misadventures. But from a young age, I was very much questioning authority and going my own path, whatever that would involve. Sometimes it wasn't great, but in the long term, it brought me to where I am now. So I don't know if I can point to a single piece of advice. I tell you, my theme for the blog and the project for the past 8 years has been: you don't have to live your life the way others expect. And that's applied in lots of different ways. And anyone listening can think, okay, how does that apply to my life? What do other people expect of me? And is that what I want to do? If so, great. Is there something else I want to do? Well, maybe I should do that instead.
Yeah, that's really good advice. We touched on bravery. What does bravery look like for you today? How do you push the envelope?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, because I felt in the past few years I actually haven't been that brave, because in the beginning of all this stuff, I was doing lots of things that were brave and different for me. And people always kind of pointed to the going to every country thing as being very brave. But at least after a certain point, it was very kind of routine for me. Like, I knew how to do it. It was just a matter of kind of pushing through. And I liked the pushing through. I liked that element of, okay, 150 countries down. Now it's 151, 152, like all the way up to 193. I kind of liked the monotony of it, but I don't know that it was brave. And so, same now in terms of the speaking that I do in the public events and writing books. Like, I love those things, definitely want to keep doing it, but I don't know that it's courageous for me to do it. So I've been asking myself that same question, because I'm in the business of encouraging people to take risks. So I want to make sure that I'm also taking risks. And I think maybe some things will be that thing about going deeper, more impact, being willing to look more at myself and saying, okay, what other growth do I have to do? Because I'm really good at identifying goals and going toward them, but maybe I'm not as good as some introspective, emotional work, inner work, that kind of stuff. So this is something that I'm figuring out, but I do think that the answer lies in a totally different direction now. It's not about another huge travel quest. It's about something a little bit different.
Yeah, that's really good. To become really good at providing what people want and need, you have to become really good at listening. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, how have you become good at listening with your community? I mean, of course, you get tons of emails. Of course, you have your summit and you hear feedback. But for those entrepreneurs, people who have an online community, to get to where your community is and listening, how have you done that?
I would say if I look back at, in particular, the past 8 years that I've had this public project, wherever I've had successes, it's because I've listened. And where I've had failures or missteps, it's because I have failed to listen. And I have thought, oh, okay, I know what's best. So I'm just going to do that. And it's really interesting because, things like World Domination Summit, they came about because I realized there was this need to unite like-minded people. And even World Domination Summit, like nobody on the outside really knows what it is. If you say the name, it's like, what is that kind of thing? But I published my first book and I went on tour to all 50 states and I met people at each stop. And I kept noticing, like, here are these really awesome people. And maybe they're entrepreneurs, maybe they're artists, maybe they're travelers, maybe they're just interested in doing something different. Like, even if they have a day job or whatever, that's fine. But they have this longing to be connected. And maybe in some ways they feel like they're kind of alone because they're doing something that's different from what their family is doing or their friends. And so they feel a little bit isolated. And wouldn't it be great if we could bring them together, not just for a virtual event, but for an in-person event? Like, I can look back there and say, okay, I really clearly listened, paid attention to a need. And the same is true with like my business projects. Obviously, there's a scale of success and failure, and some have done really well, and some have done very poorly, and some in the middle. And it's the same thing. When I listened, when I understood, okay, this is what people are saying, maybe not just directly saying, but what are they indirectly saying? Like, what is the need that underlies all of this? And when I respond to that, then I do a lot better than when I decide, okay, here's what I think is best for someone.
What a great answer right there. I loved all your answers here today. I'm really going to think about that last one you gave. Chris, go ahead and give listeners the best way that people can reach out to you.
Yeah, awesome. They can go to chrisguillebeau.com. It's Guillebeau. I'm Chris Guillebeau at all social media, or you can look at bornforthisbook.com to learn about the new book.
Awesome. A great book, too. Thanks, Chris, again for coming on today's show and for sharing your journey with the rest of us.
Awesome. Thank you again, Adam.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope you got something out of these ideas. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss an episode.